Denim Couch Podcast. Ooh, whoa, ooh, whoa.
The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s with Steph with an F.
Hi guys, welcome to the Denim Couch Podcast, where we chill on this denim couch and talk about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Stephanie Tanner. Welcome. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Tanner with the Denim Couch Podcast, and this week's episode is with Sarah Nokleby, and I just love Sarah. She is so fun to talk to. I am lucky enough to get to talk to her very frequently, and I thought she would be a really fun guest for this interview, so I'm just really excited that Sarah was willing to do this and that you get to hear from her. And before we dive into that, I was reflecting back to just over a year ago when my kid was pretty young, and I had started reading a book by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love. And this is an amazing book if you haven't read it. It's really awesome. It basically kind of teaches you how to feel peace and happiness. And it was interesting because I read it and I loved it, and I noticed that I'm always trying to sum up life into one answer, or sum up happiness into one answer, or sum up how to have peace into one answer. I'm always looking for just one answer for everything. And I noticed I do that with this podcast and with almost everything in my life. And what's interesting is that I learned from reading that book that while, yes, it did make me feel more peaceful when I used some of those tools and read that book, the overall lesson I learned is that life is actually not supposed to be easy or happy all the time. And there's not one answer for everything. But I learned that life is not about finding the key to happiness. It's not about that. We all find happiness and joy in different ways. And the best part of all is that we have incredibly different experiences, each and every one of us. We all have very different personalities, life experiences, and very different lives. And one thing I like is that I do feel like we can recognize joy in our life through the people in it, through the gifts of the earth, through animals, through choices we make, through the struggles that we go through and overcome, and then through the mindset that we choose to take. How cool it is that we get to experience life. There is so much joy in just that. And it's not the same for any two people. We can't easily categorize joy or happiness into one thing. We can't categorize any people into groups, really. If we're looking for a source of peace and happiness, it has to come from a higher power, because ultimately that higher power has given us the opportunity to experience what it is to live. And that's where happiness comes from, is just the joy of being able to live and experience the little things and overcome our trials and experience loving other people and doing and creating and all the things that come along with living. That's what makes us happy, as long as we are looking at it that way. Anyways, that was one of the thoughts I had this week, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And I would like to just dive right into Sarah's podcast. How common was your name in the 80s?
It was not common in the 80s.
Really?
No! I think Sarah is way more common now. At the time, I was like the only Sarah. I really didn't know any other Sarahs until later. And it's funny because now I always tell people, I'm like, yeah, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a Sarah these days.
What was life like in the 80s?
Wow, I'll tell you. Okay, so like I said, I lived from 1980 to 89 or 90. I started out in Utah. We moved to Salem, Oregon. We were only there for a short time before we moved to Canoga Park, California, which is like suburbs, valley of Los Angeles. which it was also during the height of the Valley Girl days. Like, oh my gosh, yes, that. I lived in the Valley for that. And then we moved to Connecticut, so clear to the other side of the country. And I was there for a couple of years. And then we moved to Seattle when I was 16. So we crisscrossed a little bit. And, overall, one of the things that I think is so interesting is just the feel of the 80s. It was during the Cold War. We literally learned about what to do in the event of a nuclear attack. And I find it hilarious they had us hide under our desk. Like that was going to do any good whatsoever, But, we literally just expected that we were going to witness a nuclear war at some point. We were going to have the attack happen. And so when the wall came down in Berlin in 89 and everything else, that was like life-changing. Like, what? Things are different. And so that was a big deal. But as far as, what it was like, I'm pre-internet. We did not have the internet until after I was married and everything else. Even when I went to college, my graduation gift was an electric typewriter. But because my dad was working for IBM, it was kind of interesting because he was one of the first to ever have a version of the internet. He had CompuServe, and it was back during the days where you pick up the phone and all you could hear was this. Yeah. Oh, and that's another thing, with phones, there's no cell phones or anything like that. So you had to fight for the chance to be on the phone. And when we got cordless phones where you could actually walk into another room and hide and have a private conversation instead of dragging the cord around the corner. I grew up in a family with 5 girls, no brothers. And the first 3 of us were like bang, bang, bang right in a row. So you can imagine there was lots of fighting over the phone. There were some people that would get like the second phone number just for the teenagers or whatever. And it was like, oh, wow. What would that be like to have that kind of life where you get to have your own life?
What did you do for fun in the 80s?
We did so much more outside. Our neighborhood, when I was younger, that whole neighborhood was like our domain, and especially during the summer, we would get on our big wheels first thing in the morning, and our parents wouldn't see us. We would be in and out of everybody's houses and different yards, and my next door neighbor literally would go out on the back of her porch every night and scream at the top of her lungs for her 3 boys, wherever they were in the neighborhood, come home. That's how you came home, and you think about it, now I think, oh my gosh, if I ever let my kids have that much control, I would have a heart attack, but that's how we were. And, when you watch Stranger Things, that's pretty much the same age and the same years that I was. I figured that out the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's about the same age we were during that year. I did love to read and draw. I actually was an artist. That was my thing. I was going to actually become a professional graphic designer. It's funny how things just come along and change your plans. I would spend a lot of time on that, and as I got older, I was affected by where I lived, of course. When I lived in California, I remember being able to go with my friends to the beach. It was still a long drive to the beach, but it would, we'd spend time at the beach, and we would be able to sleep out on people's trampolines and just do a lot of stuff like that. And when I moved to Connecticut, it was a complete culture shock. East Coast, West Coast, very different. I tell everybody, when we moved into New York, or we flew into New York when we moved there, into JFK Airport, and the first experience that I remember is having people swear at me in different languages. You know, it was like we were constantly, people don't make eye contact. They're just way more uptight. And when I went to school, I had a friend once who was grounded for getting a B on something. Everybody was just very intense. And whether you were good at school or not, you were expected to succeed. And there was just a lot of pressure there for everybody. But at the same time, there wasn't a lot to do in Connecticut for kids, especially. There was maybe a movie theater or something, but that's when everybody partied. So they would always, every weekend, it was always, you know, who got drunk and who did this and that. And I didn't drink, and I remember, you know, just at the time, I was kind of on the fence about it, you know, like, why am I doing this? And, you know, maybe I should just give in and party with all my friends. I was at my friend Nicole's house one night, and her parents were gone, and she and another girl were there. And I remember them saying, "Hey, you don't get to leave tonight until you've had some of this bourbon. You're literally going to force me to drink?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can't leave until you've had some." I'm like, wow, that is so lame. And so the funny thing is that, you know, and I didn't, but the funny thing is that I never drank anything from that point on, because I was like, dumb, if you have to force me to drink.
What were some popular activities?
One of the things that became a big interest of mine while I was living on the East Coast with my friends there was music and fashion, very much into, you know, the whole fashion scene. As far as, you know, I would always get the glamour mags, the Elle and Vogue and whatnot. And I had my, you know, my room and my walls. I had all these fashion ads that were on the wall all the time. And I would literally, you know, I started working young. I always had part-time jobs from the time I was 14 on. And I would spend my money on, like, high-end perfumes and things like that, you know. I always had the Estee Lauders or, you know, Lancome or whatever, you know, whoever the latest perfumes were. And my friends, that's what we were into. And, you know, I think my musical tastes were heavily influenced by the time I was in Connecticut, because everybody always makes fun of me because I hate Journey. And I hate a lot of the hair bands and just that, you know, everybody's like, "Oh, you grew up in the 80s, you like this." I know that's not 80s music to me. To me, 80s music was what was considered new wave. And so, like, my first concert that I went to when I was 15 was Thompson Twins and OMD, or Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. But, you know, yeah, for me, it was the Smiths and the Cure and, you know, all of that genre, Depeche Mode, so many different things. And that was really what shaped my interest in music of the period, was when I lived there. It started a little bit in Los Angeles. Oh, I still remember the first day of MTV, back when it first launched with videos. And I still remember the very first day that they launched, and I still remember watching, you know, they would give you all the hype for Madonna's new video, or when Thriller came out, Michael Jackson's Thriller, that was huge, and they pushed that and promoted it for weeks before it came out, and it was like the longest video ever, you know, and everybody was like so amazed and everything else. But yeah, so my music interests were started in California, you know, but then especially when I lived in Connecticut, I had kind of an East Coast vibe about, you know, what I liked.
Do you have any favorite memories from the 80s?
You know, I think really some of my favorite memories are just the times I spent with other people, you know, doing different things, like going to the beach in LA, or we had a neighborhood beach on a lake up in Connecticut that we would go and hang out on the dock during the summers. And you know, the East Coast, the weather there in Connecticut, because there's a lot higher. I don't know if it's the humidity or what. During the summer, it could get really hot, so humid, where it just was really, sticky feeling. Not like the South, but similar. And during the winter, it would get so cold that you felt like no matter how many layers you had on, you weren't protected, you know? I remember just spending time down on that dock during the summers with my friends, and that was so much fun. And I still remember being down there with my friend Sharon one time, and all of a sudden this head pops up over the dock by our feet and is like, "Hello, Goyle, how are you?" You know, and we're like, "What?" You know, and this kid is like, I'm here from New York, visiting for the summer. What do you guys do around here?" Love having sleepovers with my friends, like out on the trampoline, like I said. And as a little kid, I remember doing things like, our house in Utah had just mostly dirt in the backyard. And, I would spend hours out there making mud pies and building stuff in the dirt, you know. And it's funny now, I think about that, and I think, wow, that is not me at all. But I loved it. I loved being a free-range child, you know, where we run through sprinklers, or when we lived in Los Angeles, we actually had a pool in the house that we rented there. My baby sister was an infant when we moved there, and my mom took her to those classes to teach babies how to float from the time they're little, so that if she ever fell in. And she learned to swim by the time she was like just over a year, and she would run off the diving board in her little diaper, jump in. I mean, we would like put our goggles on and like get under the water and watch her, and she'd have this huge smile on under the water, and she'd like, so, and she's still like that. She's still a fish. You know, those are the kinds of things I really treasure now. I mean, there's lots of things that shaped me. You know, like I said, being alive during the Cold War, you know, I still remember being in high school in Connecticut the day the Challenger exploded, you know, having them come over the loudspeaker and say, you know, what had happened. And I remember when I was younger than that, when Reagan was shot, and we watched the news at school. And it was interesting because some of those things are what you remember. Funny, I definitely remember caring a lot about my hair and about what I looked like, you know, and having all girls in our family, my parents would say that the way it sounded every morning when we were getting ready, you know, we knew we had to be quiet and not wake them up because we left way earlier than they did. But they'd hear us in the bathroom fighting over the curling irons and everything else, and they'd be like, you know, bits that were going on in the bathroom. I remember just fun things about hanging out with friends. Those are really, really the times I remember most. And I think that probably I get more nostalgic for that because I don't see it as much today. I mean, our kids get together with friends and they do things, teenagers do things with friends and stuff that we didn't have electronics.
Yeah.
And so we were always having face-to-face conversations and, you know, having little adventures, driving around in each other's cars and doing silly things in the golf course at night or, you know, just dumb things like that, you know. But I think that those were times that I really feel nostalgic for because we don't see it as much anymore. And like I said, being a free-range child, you know, that's what it was like during the 80s.
What was the fashion like back in the 80s?
Okay, well, you know, I have a lot of hair. It was short earlier on, but when I was little, my mom would always cut my hair really short because she thought it was cute because it was naturally curly and it would curl up and stuff. And I had a kid tell me once that I was a boy because I had short hair, and it traumatized. Most of the time I had longer hair, and when I was by the time I graduated high school, I mean, I was like cousin it, man. I would hide behind my hair. I didn't have bangs, and so I could like sweep that whole thing around my head and be covered. But I never had the big fluffy bangs so much. But all my friends did. Yeah, the bangs were a thing for sure. There's an 80's character from Saturday Night Live, Rosanna Dana, and that's how I used to feel some days. Because she had this wig she would wear that was brown, curly, and would stick out to the sides, way out to the sides. That was me. But I always had a lot of hair, a lot of big hair, and our pants. We went through the pegged pants. Like you would wear slightly baggy pants, but then you'd roll them in at the bottom. So you'd always have the kind of pegged pants. And then there was this stage where we would wear skirts or bigger dresses over leggings. Guess jeans were big. Denim jackets were a thing for a while too. But I would always be reading the fashion mags and stuff. And so when I was in Connecticut, I still remember my favorite pair of pants I got from my friend Jossie, and they were like a purple paisley, and they had some, they were kind of baggy up top, but then they like had buckles or something that would tighten them around your calves. I would wear scarves and things in high school with my little mini skirts and stuff. I remember a lot, and I didn't have a lot of money, so our family didn't have a lot of money, and so when I started working, like I said, I started working at like 14, and I spent all my money on clothes, but that was the only way I was going to get what I wanted. And and talking about having sisters, yes, we would share clothes, but sometimes not very willingly. If my sisters borrowed something of mine, they knew they had to spray it with my perfume before they put it back, or else I would know that they'd worn it. I did have a pair of these boots too that, oh my gosh, they were my favorite. Okay, so I had a pair of pastel pink pumps that I got for a specific dress, and that was like, oh, I love these shoes. They're so pretty, And then there was a pair of boots that a friend of mine had, and I wanted them so badly. And I went into New York City with her once, with her and her parents, and I found some in New York City, and I bought them, and they were like these white leather slouchy boots that had cut out geometric shapes through them and that were surrounded by rough studs. Horrifying now.
What made you happy back then?
Doing things with other people, and because I moved so much and I was shy and insecure, making friends was so hard. So I lived on letters. There's no email, there was no social media, there was no texting, and it was expensive to make long-distance phone calls. So I loved getting letters and writing letters to people. And I'm sure I was a big whiner too, like, oh my gosh, it's so awful here, or something. But I loved getting mail. I went through a whole period where I would actually make envelopes out of my Glamour mag. I would take pictures, cut pages out of them, and cut out envelopes out of those and stuff. So I had the coolest envelopes and everything, and I just lived for the mail every day, to be in touch with people. So that definitely made me happy. This is pathetic, but I remember when we would get the TV guide at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of a season and go through and figure out all the shows we wanted to watch, I think about that now and I think, wow, we wasted a lot of time on TV, but it's just because we didn't have the internet. But when Christmas specials came out, oh yeah, you'd get the TV guide out, figure out what days the Christmas specials were on, and that was pure joy.
That's awesome.
And yeah, just little things like that were what brought me happiness back then, I think.
What brings you peace or calmness during hard times?
I used to hate it when my mom would tell me when we were moving, all the time as kids and stuff, and when I was so sad and everything, she's like, honey, this is just preparing you for other things. And I'm like, you mean it's gonna get worse? So But I find peace in large portions through my faith and my spiritual connections, because that goes beyond what happens here. So that's my big one. And then just being with friends and family particular. Oh, and animals. We're huge animal people. The funny thing, when I was just a little prima donna teenager, with the perfumes and the nice bed and the clothes and everything, I would never let our animals in my room. But now, I've got this big old hairy, drooly dog that sleeps with me. So, we love our animals, and they bring us so much peace and comfort. Our whole family, when we bred our dog and had puppies a few years ago, everybody would sit around at night holding a puppy, while we talked and stuff. And it was just, that's pure therapy right there. If we're not playing with our animals or doing silly things with our animals, we're watching videos of animals. I know that's dumb, but yeah. I also find peace in nature, in things that are beautiful. I mentioned that so much of my early life was focused on art, and finding beauty in things around me. And I still find peace in beauty, artistic, man-made, but also, or especially, I should say, in natural surroundings. And I don't spend enough time out enjoying that. I need to do more. But I can find so much peace just even, when I'm working from home during the pandemic, looking out the window and watching my dog go ape over a squirrel, or watching some birds circling and doing, just watching the birds for 5 minutes, with all their little patterns and things that they're doing out there. And, it's just a lot of things to be said for slowing down.
Sarah is just the best. In fact, all her stories, she has so much detail and her descriptions are incredible. And I just felt like I could envision the 80s by Sarah's description. So I am so happy that she was able to do that. And thank you, Sarah. You are just one of my favorites. All right. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. I plan on chatting with you next week. Bye. Wait. You can't miss the embarrassing story of the week. No. Okay. It's that time. It's Steph with an F's embarrassing story of the week. The embarrassing story of this week. Well, I hate to keep bringing up being pregnant, but I think that in itself is embarrassing. For example, I had Texas Roadhouse the other night, and the worst heartburn I've ever experienced in my life. And when I say the worst, I mean it was just insanely awful, and heartburn shouldn't even be that painful. It was embarrassingly horrible. And so, yeah, everyone was over, and I'm just complaining about heartburn 24/7 and unable to enjoy everyone else's company because of this. Or like running at the park to chase my child while pregnant. That is embarrassing. Running, it just doesn't look the same anymore, With that, have a great week. I hope it's the best. I will talk with you next week. Bye.
If you came here for mental health help, please go visit your doctor. If you're looking for some mental health tips, Dr. Daniel Amen is someone I follow. I love what he has to say and offer. I think his website is brainhealthassessment.com, and he just has some awesome checklist items that go over brain health or habits that you should be doing to have better brain health. I want to say there's like 5 to 10 items, and if you have those, if you're working on those habits and trying to improve them to improve your brain health, you'll also improve your happiness level, because brain health equals mental health. So keep your brains happy and healthy, and check out Dr. Daniel Amen. This is not sponsored. I just really like what he has to say, and I think it's really beneficial. I think it can help a lot of people. It's actually very matter of fact, kind of obvious, but yeah, we neglect so many of these habits daily. And I do feel like, if you're feeling unhappy, that may be one of the reasons you're unhappy, because you're neglecting your brain health, which is also your mental health. And yeah, trying to improve these habits could really help. So check him out. If you have any stories from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, please get in contact with me. Let's chat. I want nothing more than to chat about the past. I want nothing more than to chat about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you have any specific questions that I'm not asking that you would like to know about these eras while interviewing these people, please let me know. I would love some advice, and I would love your input. So, what would you guys like to know?